The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast do not necessarily represent those of the podcast, its host, or sponsors. If you would like to discuss the murder in your family on this podcast, please be sure to visit themurderinmyfamily.com for more information. You can support this podcast by visiting patreon.com/themurderinmyfamily. This episode may contain unsettling material or subject matter. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to this special bonus episode of The Murder in My Family. I'm your host, Mike Morford. Today we'll be discussing the 2007 murder of Karen Bodine and the unique use of a group of citizen detectives coming together as a team to try and solve the case. In 2007, the nude body of 37-year-old Karen Bodine was found alongside a heavily wooded road in Rochester, Washington. The mother of three had been strangled to death. No one has ever been charged in her murder, and authorities to this day remain tight-lipped about the investigation. Karen had struggled with drugs since high school, which has led some people to ask, did Karen's lifestyle contribute to her death, and did she know her killer? Or is it possible that Karen crossed paths with a deadly stranger? Thurston County, Washington is located on the western side of the state. Its history can be traced back to the Native Americans who lived here over 500 years before white settlers came into the area. Within the boundaries of Thurston County sits the small community of Rochester, about 25 miles southwest of Olympia. The town is situated between the Black River to the north and the Chehalis River to the south. The population here is only about 2,400, and Rochester is where Karen Bodine called home. Karen Lee Bodine was born in Olympia, Washington on March 11, 1969, to Dave and Sharon Bodine. She has one older brother named Greg. Karen had a good relationship with her family and a pretty normal childhood growing up. Her parents provided her with a nice, stable upbringing, and she never lacked for anything. She was a cheerleader in grade school and played sports, and ran around with a good group of kids. By the time she entered high school, Karen had matured into a beautiful girl, with a gorgeous smile and looks that turned many heads. Her father, Dave, absolutely disliked taking her to the mall, because older men would stare at her. Being the protective father that he was, he couldn't help but think that he wanted to punch their lights out. Sometime during her junior year of high school, Karen started going downhill a bit, although her behavior at that time wasn't enough for her parents to notice any red flags. During her senior year of high school, the changes in Karen were hard to ignore. Her grades slipped, and she started skipping school. Her eyes were bloodshot from smoking pot, and she'd break her parents' curfew. She told her parents she was going to the homecoming dance, so they bought her a dress, only to find out later that she never went to the dance. Around this time, she met the father of her future children. He was already using drugs when they met, and he was the one that introduced Karen to that lifestyle. Since then, he's been on and off drugs and in and out of prison. Because he hasn't been charged and may still be part of the investigation, we're not going to name him in this episode. Karen's problems with drugs led to her parents paying for a stay at a nice rehabilitation center. But Karen did stay clean and went back to using drugs. In her late teens, she gave birth to her first child, a girl she named Carly, followed by two more children, Taylor and Tanner. Her then boyfriend is the father of all three kids, but the two never married. Their relationship was tumultuous throughout the entire time they were together, according to Karen's parents. At some point, Karen's drug use caused her to lose custody of the children. Dave and Sharon gained custody of them soon after. Karen had visitation rights with her kids, with the condition that she be clean and sober at each visit. And according to her mother Sharon, she was. In early 2007, Karen was not living on her own or with her parents, and instead bounced between two homes. Her family always knew where she was most of the time. Sharon could contact her through an ex-boyfriend's cell phone. On the night of January 22, 2007, Karen spent time with this ex-boyfriend. Later that night, a Lacey, Washington police officer saw Karen walking near Sleater Kinney Road and 14th Avenue, sometime between 9 and 10 p.m. He pulled over to do a welfare check on her. It's unclear who asked the officer to do the welfare check, but Karen told the officer she was going home to Rochester. The officer left Karen alone and continued patrolling. Less than 12 hours later, a passing motorist called 911 at 8:45 a.m. to report a dead body laying just off Little Rock Road in Rochester. Thurston County detectives immediately drove to the scene. When they arrived, they found the nude body of a female lying on the ground about 20 to 25 feet off Little Rock Road, less than a mile east of Sargent Road in an unused county gravel pit. The victim was lying on her back with her head resting on an abandoned car seat. The body was that of a thin woman with short, spiky, bleach blonde hair with pink highlights. There were no indications the victim had been sexually assaulted. Authorities took the victim's fingerprints and a digital photograph of her, hoping to learn the woman's identity. They also found 2 tire tracks leading to the body and took pictures of those as well. Police spent 4 hours searching along Little Rock Road, a 2-lane county road. The area surrounding the road is heavily wooded and is known for deer and duck hunting. Police found nothing in the search, no clothing, purse, or wallet. Damon Danforth and his wife lived on the corner of Sargent and Little Rock Roads. He had walked down to the crime scene after he phoned his wife on his cell phone to tell her about what was going on at the gravel pit. She told him that at around 7:50 a.m. that morning, she saw a small, brown, early 1980s Datsun parked near the entrance to the gravel pit. No one was around, so she figured it was just an abandoned car and drove on. Damon gave detectives his wife's phone number in case police wanted to speak with her. Meanwhile, detectives checked to see if any missing persons in Thurston County and surrounding counties matched the unidentified body, but they didn't see any immediate hits. Lewis County Sheriff's Office had no outstanding missing person cases at all, and Grays Harbor County didn't have any missing females. Later that night, an emergency dispatcher recognized the victim's description. It matched that of a description given to the dispatcher by the Lacey police officer who checked on Karen Bodine the night before. And after further investigation, police determined that the victim was indeed Karen Bodine. At that time, police released very little details about Karen's death, only calling it suspicious. They also said they found no obvious injuries or wounds that could have caused her death, only saying there were markings found on her body. They later revealed she had been strangled with a ligature that was still wrapped tightly around her neck. An unknown male's DNA was recovered from the ligature. Police said it was possible the killer wanted Karen's body found because it was visible from Little Rock Road. They believed her body was dumped overnight, because if it had been dumped there the day she died, someone would have found her sooner. Not to mention, the killer could have also disposed of her in the forest over a hillside, out of the view of passing motorists. But he didn't. What's interesting here is that Damon's wife saw the Datsun at 7:50 a.m., but didn't see a body. The 911 call about the body wasn't made until 8:45 a.m., and the Datsun was gone by that time. So the killer most likely dumped the body between 7:50 a.m. and 8:45 a.m. Police wouldn't speculate if Karen knew her killer, or if they had a serial killer case on their hands, but they ruled nothing out early on in the investigation. Thurston County Coroner Gary Warnick performed Karen's autopsy the next day, but police didn't release details, pending toxicology results. But they did say that Karen likely died from homicidal trauma, and they were now treating the case as a homicide. Detectives started digging into Karen's background and discovered she had a history of arrest, but was never convicted of a felony. Between 1993 and 1997, there were 6 requests for restraining orders petitioned by 2 men against Karen. One of them was the father of her children. In March 1993, he alleged that Karen attacked him, resulting in, quote, a torn-off toenail and multiple scratches and abrasions. The court granted him the protection order on May 17, 1993. On September 23, 1996, while in police custody, Karen tested positive for methamphetamine and marijuana after taking a urinalysis test. On January 12, 2007, just 10 days before her death, a South Sound man also petitioned the court for a restraining order against Karen, but it's not publicly known who this man is. The investigation into Karen Bodine's murder continued, but they never made an arrest, In January 2014, police announced new information had surfaced in Karen's murder. Authorities said that early in the investigation, there were people who had knowledge of her death, but the trail went cold. Detectives interviewed several people who came forward with new information about Karen's murder, and some of those people said that her murder may have been a result of her involvement in the local drug scene. But police were still tight-lipped about the investigation in 2014. Since that time, not much has happened in the case, and if you Google Karen Bodine, you won't find much. There are hardly any articles on her murder. For some reason, local media didn't cover it much, and her family believes it's because of her lifestyle. Another woman, Nancy Moyer, disappeared from Tenino, Washington in 2009, just 2 years after Karen's murder. Tenino is only about 12 miles northeast of Rochester. Nancy has never been found, but her case received far more media attention than Karen's. Nancy's case also remains unsolved, but Thurston County officials say that two cases are likely not related. On October 17th through the 20th of 2019, CrimeCon's CrowdSolve will examine Karen and Nancy's cases. Participants will work alongside investigators to try and solve each case. One investigator who will be there is Art Roderick, a retired U.S. Marshal, who helped investigate the disappearance of Maura Murray and was seen in the Oxygen Channel's documentary, The Disappearance of Maura Murray. Roderick said there's plenty of material in Karen's case available to CrowdSolve participants, including phone records, crime scene photos, police reports, and statements. CrowdSolvers will have access to the full, unredacted case file during their participation. The CrowdSolve participants will also explore the markings on Karen's body and the tire tracks found at the scene, according to CrimeCon's website. Roderick also told the Oxygen Channel earlier this month that the unknown DNA covered from the ligature around Karen's neck could be tested again, and very possibly with updated DNA procedures. Karen Bodine's children are now adults and will be at CrowdSolve in Seattle this October. They also run a Facebook page for Karen called Justice for My Mom, Karen Bodine, although the page doesn't look like it's been active since 2017. Karen's parents, Dave and Sharon Bodine, still live in the Olympia, Washington area, where they were successful realtors for over 3 decades. Despite the passage of almost 13 years since Karen Bodine was murdered, her family still wants and deserves answers. Karen's mother, Sharon, joined me to discuss Karen's case. That conversation is next, followed by a second conversation with CrimeCon's organizer, Kevin Bath, who discusses CrimeCon's efforts to help bring awareness to and solve Karen's case. Hi, Sharon, and thanks for joining us to discuss your daughter Karen's case with us.
Well, thank you for calling. I'd love to share anything I can to help solve this.
That's one thing that we definitely would like to help you do, if possible. You've been searching for answers in your daughter's death for over a decade now. How frustrating has that search been for you and your family?
There's no words to describe it, Mike. It's an everyday pain, and I've been to the point, and so has Dave. We're pretty well known in the community, and I don't even want to go to town half the time because somebody will say, "What's going on in Karen's case?" Or at the beginning, everybody would grab us and hug us, and we're not a podunk town; we're the state capital. It just was so frustrating that, and still, it's still to the point where that's the first thing people say. They said, I've been wanting to call you, Sharon. I didn't know how to call you, but now I ran into you. I've got to know, how are you guys doing? How are the kids doing? And is there anything new? We haven't heard anything. So it's over a decade later, like you said, Mike, it's still ongoing pain. I know it'll never go away, but maybe it'll help us if we could get this solved.
Definitely. And it sounds like, in addition to being on your minds, it's on other people's minds in your area as well.
Oh, yeah, they're always asking, what's going on? How come there's nothing going on? There's other cases that happen at the same time, and we're getting, updates, but nothing is ever mentioned about Karen.
And that's an interesting point, because when I searched online, I did a Google search about Karen, there was barely anything at all about her on the internet. Now, some cases, if you search a name, you'll get thousands of hits and articles pop up and news videos and everything else. But with Karen's case, next to nothing. Has it been frustrating that maybe Karen's case hasn't gotten the kind of attention as some of those other cases? And why do you think it hasn't gotten the attention?
I believe it's because of her tumultuous past in the last couple of years of high school and up till when she came to her demise. I think she was not as important as some people because she hadn't been squeaky clean. I don't think they ever took into consideration that she had 3 little children that needed to know, and 2 parents and a brother. And our biggest desire right now, Mike, is to solve this so our grandchildren don't have to go through this alone. And someday, maybe they'll find who did it, and they have to deal with it alone. We would like to be here to support them. You know, we're 75 and 76 years old. To go back to your question, I think it was a tumultuous lifestyle she had. She was very, very well known in the community for good things, too.
But you think maybe unfairly she didn't get that attention because she had some things in her past that weren't squeaky clean?
Yeah, and I do believe, and I cannot say this for an exact, but it seems like at times, well, it still seems like it, that we had a biased investigation without putting any names on that.
You think things could have gone better or smoother as far as the investigation goes? Well,
yes, because we were asking for phone records, if they could get phone records of people that were not important, but they were important in Karen's life. I mean, she thought. And we told them to get phone records, and they would not check phone records. Finally, several years later, somebody said, well, yeah, they can get phone records. They can be researched back a long way as well. We started asking for phone records the first week after Karen's death, and they were not gotten. And we all know a lot can be done with phone records.
What we're hoping to do is maybe overcome some of the pitfalls that have happened in the past and maybe come up with some new ideas to help solve Karen's case. Just recently, the awesome folks over at CrimeCon decided to dive into Karen's case, and they're asking a crowd in Seattle this October to put their thinking caps on and to try and brainstorm in an effort to try and solve Karen's case. Are you encouraged by the interest from them in Karen's case, and do you think this new attention on the case might help solve it?
Oh, my goodness, Mike. There's no way to explain, and it may be overzealous, I hope not, but how excited Dave and I and her 3 kids and her brother are to think somebody's still thinking of our daughter, our mother, our sister, and could help us know something or something be solved. There's anything in our family would want more than just to have this resolved and have it taken care of. For these little children, they're not little anymore. They're 30, 27, and 24. But they're babies when it comes to talking about their mom. There's been times when I walked into the little one's room and he was 14 or so, crying, and I know he hides it now, but he's devastated. He keeps thinking his mom's coming home. Well, not now, but he did then.
And that's, in these cases, when there's a murder victim, they're not the only victim. There's collateral damage to family and parents and siblings and children. And that's what I think gets lost a lot of times in these kind of cases.
At her service, I can tell you now, there would be much more support and much more anxiety and a celebration of life with the people that would show up to help us support solving this case. That would be happy it was solved.
Yeah. And I assume, and you can answer for me, but I assume it makes you feel pretty good to know that all these people that are going to be trying to do this for Karen's case, most of them probably have never met her or didn't know her, will be taking time to try and put their efforts into solving it. Does that make you feel pretty good?
Oh, like I said, I can feel more of a good feeling in my heart since this has started, CrimeCon, than since the whole case began. We just never had much hope. And now we see a glimmer of hope that these wonderful people are working on Karen's case. Yeah.
When we look through reports and stuff online, again, there's not a lot out there. CrimeCon's trying to get their hands on some stuff to really dive into this case, but as far as newspaper articles and things online, there's just not much out there. But a couple of the articles mentioned that Karen was living a transient lifestyle, which you and I talked a little bit offline, and you said that's not really the case. Can you just, for listeners out there that might not know Karen's living situation at the time, can you sort of explain where she was living and how that sort of got misconstrued?
Well, I guess I can't. I think my words I misconstrued. I guess, yeah, she was living sort of somewhat of a transient lifestyle. But having said that, she was always in touch with us and her kids. Most generally, it was from one person's cell phone that she had constant touch with. And I did ask for more information on that person and never heard anything back.
And that was somebody that you think police maybe should have looked at a little bit closer, in your opinion?
Yeah, and I have to tell you, Mike, because of my soft heart and my, and that's not only my description of myself, but Karen was with this guy for many years. And sometimes he would call me, or I'd go over to the house, and he would come out to I would go over to the house to get Karen or pick up Karen or just visit her. And he would come out there and he says, Sharon, I love her so much, and I want to help her. But we got to get clean. And he would say, we got to get clean. And I said, I know. And I'm not going to use his name, but he would say, I know. And he'd actually break down in tears. And this went on for years. He would always bring Karen to the house to visit with the kids. I think I did. He did. They did take the kids. We trusted him enough that, and Karen, enough that the kids were safe with him. Always brought him home on time. They had a good time, and they liked him. So I had a soft heart about making accusations towards him at the beginning. But then other people started bringing things out to me that Sharon, you're being too kind.
So, and just to clarify too, you had custody of Karen's kids at the time. She didn't live with you, but she had visitation and she was in contact and visiting the kids on a regular basis.
Yes.
Okay.
We had always told Karen, so that we had total control, Mike, we adopted him. Without that, we'd be running through a system. And we thought it was in best interest that Karen knew these kids were with us permanently. Karen knew that we were adopting them. They were going to be our kids. And as long as she was clean and sober, all she had to do was call. Make sure we were going to be home and come and visit the kids. And it brings tears to my eyes because she would be clean. That part doesn't bring tears to my eyes, but the joy they had together. I would say Karen's last words were, "My kids, please, whatever, let me live. I've got my kids." And I'm sure every mother feels that way, but Karen just really showed the joy for her kids. She was with us on every holiday, most holidays, I'll say, always at Christmas time. And she didn't have much money, but she always had something for him. Whether it fit or not, it was always she had a gift for him.
So despite her hardships that she dealt with, the kids were always very important to her.
Yep. It's just that she just, I don't know what to say. The drugs took a hold on her, and she had relapses. But there was never a long time between phone calls or anything like that.
Unfortunately, addiction is a very powerful thing, and it's a disease that is epidemic, really now. So that's totally understandable. Take us back to when Karen was killed. How and when did you find out that she was dead?
It seems like you almost know the answer to this story, but I'm sure you don't. It was on the news, the Seattle News, before we were notified. I was coming home from picking up her kids at sports practices, and my phone started ringing. Well, I didn't answer my phone, thank God, especially when the kids were in my car. But I came home, and when I got home, the detectives were here. And I says, "Wait a minute. What is going on here?" I said, "Let me check the phone calls I got." Because, I had 15 phone calls in a 10-mile drive. And every one of them had seen it on the news before I knew about it. And before the detectives came to our house to tell us. They got to my house about, 6 o'clock. It was on the 4 o'clock news.
They actually named Karen before they told you?
That's exactly true. And that's why I was getting the phone calls. I had a niece that lived in Port Angeles, which is a couple-hour drive away from here. She heard it on the news up there.
Well, and as if that's not bad enough, I can imagine when you found out the details of her body being discarded, in a gravel pit alongside the road. How, as a parent, do you deal with something like that?
Well, Mike, you're just asking the right questions. Because that particular morning, of course, I assume, I know she was probably dumped there in the middle of the night sometime, but we had an appointment in South County, actually bordering county, Lewis County, and I never go to 8 o'clock in the morning appointments. Dave always handled those. And that morning I woke up and I told Dave, I said, I want to go with you. He says, "What? Are you crazy? You never want to get up and go any place at 8 o'clock in the morning." I says, "Yeah, I just want to go on the ride with you, blah, blah, blah." And we always took the freeway. But that morning I said to Dave, "Let's drive up the old road." I said, "It's just a more peaceful, nice drive, and I'm up early, so let's go the old way and we can take a leisurely drive." We got, Karen's body was found 10 miles, I should say, from our house. Not even that, 8 miles from our house. And I told Dave, I said, "Dave, slow down. Something's happened up here. Look at the helicopters flying all over, and look at all the red, blue, yellow lights were going." And we slowed way down. And I don't like looking at accidents or whatever might have happened there, so I just turned my head. Didn't see anything. Dave did. And just, oh man, that was gruesome. We kept right on going, went on our appointments. So goes the day. What was that? That was Karen's case they were investigating that we drove by.
To get her name on TV before they actually contact you Usually that's not what they do.
No, her 4-year-old son, not 4-year-old, I'm sorry, at 4 o'clock, Tanner, the youngest one, was home. And because the detectives were there, at 6 or 7 o'clock, it must have been around 6, because our living room television was on, and I said, holy crap. And I saw it on the news. I immediately turned off that TV, and I ran to Tanner's bedroom and turned off his TV. Well, I looked at what he was watching. He didn't know yet about his mom. He didn't know what was going on in the other part of the house. He was watching it on the news.
Wow. And he was how old at the time?
11.
Wow. So he was old enough to understand and know.
Oh, yeah. I went right in there. By the time I got into his room, I saw it was the news, and I saw that was on there. Whereas the channel I'd been watching in the living room, I had my TV on. So I went right in and just slammed my hand into the controls and turned the TV off. And he said, what's the matter, Grandma? And I said, honey, I'll tell you later. He knew.
Obviously, you've got to deal with all that emotion and shock and sadness and stuff. How soon did you start thinking in your mind, or did you start thinking in your mind about what might have happened, who might have done it, or who was responsible?
Immediately. I mean, because we kept as close of tabs on Karen as we could. She didn't have a phone, but she always had access to the one boyfriend's phone on a very regular basis. So, but I immediately ruled out the boyfriend because, like I told you, I felt he had a soft heart and really cared about Karen. But I later found out that somebody had a restraining order on her. It said that in the paper, if you read that article, 10 days before she died. Now, to me, that's a red flag. If somebody had a restraining on her 10 days before she died, I would check that person out real fast. But I didn't even reread these articles and totally capture that part of it until I got the call at CrimeCom. I got up and read all the articles again. And it said in there that she had a restraining order on her, put on her on January 11th. She was dead on the 22nd. It was the day of her murder.
So
I don't know what you...
A week and a half later, it sounds like that happened.
Yeah, like I said, this just all come to awakening with me when I reread the articles that I couldn't even read before. And if I'd have known that then, I'd immediately said to the detectives, hey, who had the restraining order? Or if you don't want to tell me, have you checked out that person? I still to this day don't know who it was. They did go to one of the places they thought Karen might have been. Said they got no answers. It was a cluster of a lot of people. And I don't even know when they went there, if they went there the next morning or that night. They were high, drunk, high, whatever you want to say, and couldn't make heads or tails or any of them. And they said there was warrants for most of them in the room. And I says, why didn't you arrest them? You know what they said to me? Because there was too many of them and only 2 of us. Does that make sense to you, that they couldn't have walked right outside and said 911, get over here, help us.
Get some backup.
Get some backup here, and let's get some of these guys arrested. And if they'd have got them arrested, maybe there'd have been somebody speaking if they knew anything once they got behind bars.
Yeah. And this person that you suspect could have been involved with, obviously we're not naming him, but was he
was
ever...
not part of that group.
Okay.
Yeah,
was he ever checked out by police? Did they ever look at him closely and rule him out, possibly?
They tried to. Every time they tried to do a polygraph. I know they don't stand up in court, but I do know that it helps them with further information. You know, if it's looking weak or if they fail it, they can go that direction and look. Yeah, they tried to. They never did get a polygraph from him because he always said he'd been sick, he had the flu, and at one point he came in and said he had a stroke.
Wow. And so in all these years, over 10 years later, they've never given him a polygraph even?
No. Not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge.
Were there any other suspects that you know of? Anybody that they considered or that
yeah, they brought in several people and questioned them. I don't know how many they did polygraphs with. But they would tell me, well, we've got a meeting with so-and-so tomorrow, and who knows if he'll show up. And it's been so long ago, they brought in several, but none of them did they come up with anything solid enough to say we're watching them or we're going to go put the heat on them anymore.
So some people that might have been worth looking at have possibly slipped through the cracks after all this time.
Mm-hmm. I would almost bet that the person that killed my daughter, our daughter, they've had up at Thurston County in being detective, questioned.
So you think there's a chance police have actually talked to them at some point?
Yeah. Or a close connection to them.
As months went by and then months turned into years, were you surprised that there was no arrest? Did you think one would come quickly?
Oh, of course, that was my dream. But no, I knew it wouldn't, the way the investigation was going.
Well, obviously, we all want to support police, and obviously they are understaffed and under budget in many cases, and most police do the best they can. But we also know that sometimes investigations don't go smoothly. How was your experience with the aftermath of all this and trying to communicate with the police and get some of the details about the investigation? Were they pretty cooperative, pretty open with you? Was it a overall good relationship, would you say?
Well, Mike, it's hard to say. Because there again, I'm pretty vulnerable. I don't know how to say it. I'm just pretty out front, honest person. So I believed everything they said to me. I questioned some of the things, and I'm still not happy about some of the things that happened.
2019 it is now. It's, this has happened 13 years ago now. And here we are with a new way to try and approach the case as far as CrimeCon and the CrowdSolve that they're doing in Seattle. This is something fresh. This is something different, a new approach. And it's a way to get it in front of a bunch of people. There's a little inside joke that the people that attend CrimeCon, they have these shirts sometimes that say, basically a detective, because they watch a lot of crime shows, they read a lot of true crime books, and they have ideas. So I think anytime you can get them, they may not be deputized real police officers, but when you can get that kind of crowd in together and start thinking together and start brainstorming, it's just a new way to look at a case. And maybe in a case like this that hasn't gone anywhere and it's just sitting there, maybe this can be what really ignites it. Do you or your family, will anybody be at the CrowdSolve event in Seattle?
Well, Karen's 3 kids will be.
Oh, okay.
That's Tanner, Taylor, and Carly. It's hard to say because of poor health. I'm not going to be able to be there. And I want to be there, but I can't.
Yeah.
And having said that, I think there's two reasons why Dave won't be there. Emotions, and he thinks he should be here with me because I'm not well. And don't get me wrong, I'm not going to keel over tomorrow, and I don't have bad cancer. I've got some other issues. A lot of it due to emotional stress.
Oh, absolutely. That's totally understandable, because I think a lot of times in these kind of situations that takes a toll on you.
Yeah.
So hopefully you're feeling better, and I'm sure her kids are going to go there and represent your family well. And I know you've been carrying the torch for a while for the case. And I really, truly hope that at CrimeCon you guys can get some new insights and some new ideas and help spread the word about the case and let people know that it's still unsolved and needs help.
Yeah, it's to a family that's gone through what we've gone through from the beginning of Karen's tumultuous life to the present right now. It takes a big toll. It never leaves your mind. Extremely so since her death. I mean, one of the kids will try to say something, or they'll find a trinket on the Christmas tree that was Karen's when she was a little girl. There's just so many memories, that just bring tears to all of us, and we hold them back for the strength of each other.
That sounds like, even though more than a decade's gone by now, it doesn't, they say time helps heal all wounds, but it doesn't make them go away completely, it sounds like.
No, especially when the word closure, I'm a firm believer of that word, which I don't think it would have been before. But if we knew somebody was being accountable, and the right person for sure, it would be the best day we've had since the day we heard she died. I think we'd have a happy, sad, good time together as a family.
I hope that somehow you do find the answers that you've been waiting for, and your family won't necessarily have closure because nothing will bring your daughter back, but hopefully you can get answers that you deserve. We're gonna do our best to spread the word and get it out there, and I know CrimeCon's really gonna do their part.
Well, that's what we hope and pray for, Mike.
Well, once again, I just want to thank you for joining me to discuss Karen's case and opening up about it.
I appreciate your call. I appreciate every single person that's still got an eye open on this situation.
With us today is Kevin Bouth of CrimeCon. Hi, Kevin, and welcome to the show.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Just a quick introduction. Kevin is one of the key people that brings us all these great true crime conventions every year called CrimeCon, which is something that people have heard me talk about on social media and on my podcast. But for those listeners out there that don't know about CrimeCon, Kevin, can you give them a synopsis of what it is?
Yeah, and Mike, you've been one of our biggest and earliest supporters, so thank you for that. Sure, CrimeCon's about 3 years old. We started it with our first event, 2017. And really the idea was, all of us in the true crime community engage with this content all year round. And many of us listen to podcasts and watch the documentaries and read the books and everything else. And so it felt like there needed to be an outlet for all of us to get together and, meet each other and really form that sense of community, but also, engage with the hosts and with Dateline and 2020 and 48 Hours and, the key players from the key documentaries of that year. So we look at the weekend. It's one weekend a year. really a sort of part education, part kind of immersion in the genre, and then the rest, I think a little bit of entertainment. And I always like to tell people who have issues with us, having fun at the true crime convention that, sometimes a little bit of sugar makes the medicine go down, right? And so some of the things we do that are having fun in New Orleans. We've been in New Orleans and Nashville, and we're about to go to Orlando. That, yeah, we have a little bit of fun, but I think you can attest that during the day there's quite a bit of emotional content, educational content. You've got victims' families there, and we're talking about some really in-depth, nerdy stuff as well in terms of forensics and topics that you wouldn't find at a typical fan-facing convention.
Yeah, and I think that's what's great about it is you do have this mix of, serious stuff, a little bit of light stuff to take the edge off, because we all need that once in a while. But it's just a really great place for you to sort of mingle with people that are like-minded without that, that people sort of say, well, I'm into true crime, and not everybody is accepting of that or understanding of that. So when you find people that are all in that same boat as you, you can sort of mingle with them, and they get you, you get them, and it's a really fun time.
Yeah, I've heard some attendees describe it as just feeling, and not to be punny about it, but to feel that it's a safe space in terms of true crime fans know why they like the genre, and I think none of us feel guilty about it until you're around someone who doesn't get it, and thinks that it's all about sensationalism and reveling in other people's misery. And, for people that show up to CrimeCon, we all know that's not it at all. It's the farthest thing from the truth. So, but I think to not have to have those arguments or explain yourself to anyone is a really nice feeling for everybody who's there. And then that leads to, which is, I think the best part of the weekend, kind of the new friendships that are formed. And we've heard so many incredible stories about people who come to CrimeCon alone and then ultimately have found these groups that they come back to with every year. So we're really proud of the event, but I think more proud that we found kind of our people and our audience who is the perfect fit for this, and who has decided that, you tell us where it is and we'll be there every year.
Yeah, and that's what's great about it. And you really try to reach out to different areas. And you mentioned, you've been to Nashville, you've been to New Orleans, you're heading to Orlando. The first one was Indianapolis. So you guys really try and go out to different areas, trying to bring more people into the group.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things where if you do come every year, obviously the programming switches up, but I think it's also about the destination a little bit, right? That we try to, we've taken a little bit of heat that we haven't been west of the Mississippi yet, but we'll rectify that. But we try to, expose you to a new city every year too, even if it's one that you wouldn't necessarily have thought to go out on your own. And we heard from tons of people who had never been to Nashville, and had in fact never been to New Orleans, which was surprising. But, I think it's finding those things in each city too. By Nashville, there's the Alcatraz East Museum. By Nashville is Alcatraz East, and there's different relationships to true crime in each area of the country and in each city, and so I think part of it is making the city kind of a player in the weekend as well. And so we've had a lot of fun trying to figure out how to take the best of each city that we go to and sort of bring it into the walls of the convention.
Yeah, and if you're a true crime fan, this is an event to be at, because where else can you talk to your favorite true crime celebrities and dozens of podcasters? I mean, there's people like Paul Holes, Nancy Grace, Josh Mankiewicz, Keith Morrison, Billy Jensen. I mean, you could just go on and on. It's a who's who of the true crime community. How much of a chore is it getting that lineup together to bring to people that are going to be interested in that?
I wouldn't call it a chore, but it's definitely a full-time, all-year job. I mean, we, for us, I liken it a lot of times to, and some people get the analogy, some don't, but politics, right? Where you could have two Republicans or two Democrats at a dinner together, and you would think like, oh, Bob, you should meet Joe. You guys are both Republicans. And they start talking and realize they don't really have anything in common, right? Or same thing on the liberal side. You could be like a Bernie Sanders Democrat or, a Barack Obama Democrat. And on true crime, we found much the same thing, that there are a lot of flavors of true crime fans. Just to name a few, you've got the Innocence Project wrongful conviction side, folks who really want want to engage only in that kind of programming, meet exonerees, those sorts of things. You've got more of the prosecutorial law enforcement side. You've got the kind of people who only really are interested in the science. Like, I want to pretend like I'm at John Jay and I want to do criminology classes. You've got victims' rights advocates. You've got cold case people. Now, there's a lot of overlap that some people do enjoy multiple topics within the genre. But from us, as programmers, what we try to do is almost use the cruise ship model, where every hour we've got 4, 5, 6 things going on, and you can really wind your own path through the weekend. To the point where I think 2 attendees could go to CrimeCon and literally have never sat in the same session and have seen completely different things and had a completely different experience. So in some ways, we've made it harder on ourselves because the challenge is to be so diverse and to really represent the genre as a whole, us being a platform, rather than any one content creator or any one discipline within it. So I guess to answer your question, you're making me tired already as I talk about how to put this program together for Orlando.
Well, luckily you've still got a little bit of time before that one kicks off.
Yeah, not till May, right?
But I did want to point out for listeners something you touched on earlier. This is a little bit different than, say, a Star Trek convention. There's not people running around dressed up in Charles Manson costumes.
No.
It's very tasteful. This isn't like a murder fan club meetup. The guests that you have there are all people that have worked their entire careers to bring attention to cases or to solve cases and help put bad guys away. And I think the visitors that come and buy a ticket and come to CrimeCon are part of a caring community that support shining a light on the bad stuff that happens in this world and trying to make a difference. And I think that's what's amazing about the true crime community as a whole, is how respectful and supportive it is.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the frustrating things, that when outsiders, and especially we've had some media who've written their stories without any work, that just want to do the whole true crime fans have something wrong with them perspective. And then I think the media that's gone there and taken it in and witnessed it kind of calls me after, and they're like, wow, that was really not what I expected, right? I did expect the cosplay, and I say to them, that's just not the way we built it. We built it in a certain way. It's a premium priced event, which we don't shy away from, right? You've really got to want to be there and make a commitment to be there. And then the people that we bring in from the presentation perspective aren't going to tolerate, and we're not as organizers going to tolerate, any sort of behavior that we feel like would be disrespectful to the folks that are there. The Delphi murder case is a good example, and one that I always use, of a family where this happened at, in the Indianapolis area, as we were doing that first event. And since then, they've come with us to Nashville and New Orleans, with the Indiana State Police, with Ashley Banfield from HLN the year before, and have said, we're not a cold case yet, and we don't want to be there, and so we want your help to keep this case alive, to keep them alive. We want to keep putting the mugshot out there. We want to keep giving case updates. And so when people say, "Oh, you're just going and reveling in crime," well, no. Here's a great example of, we're trying to actively help, right? I mean, the police are asking for help. The family's asking for help. How do we use this platform in the best possible way? That's what's always on our mind. And we've taken countless calls from police and families where we're trying to figure out how to do just that, a year after year and event after event. And also educating. I think the other thing we always hear from police and attorneys is, hey, an educated jury pool is a good jury pool in my district. And the more you guys are doing things where you're teaching a jury about how CSI is not real life and how these things really work, and the plus and minuses of DNA and all these sorts of things that are education but for the general public are good. And so, I know I'm preaching to the choir here with you and the audience, but I think it's that safe space that I mentioned, that you can go in and really feel that you don't have to answer to anyone. You don't have to explain yourself. You're just going to immerse yourself in the content.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue, because you guys at CrimeCon have taken the same approach in a unique way. You realize that CrimeCon can make a difference and help families or help unsolved cases move along. And that brings me to you guys doing what you call CrowdSolve. Tell us a little bit about the CrowdSolve events and how they differ from the main CrimeCon conventions.
Yeah, very different. And the first CrowdSolve is happening in Seattle, October 17th to 21st. It's a weekend-long event up there. So, Mike, this came out of really doing some small things at CrimeCon. We did a thing called the PI Experience for a couple of years with Sheila Wysocki, who's a pretty well-known private investigator. We've done some sessions called Wine and Crime, which, despite their name, are really looks at cold cases where you're sort of getting into the case file. And in all these instances, what we heard from attendees afterward was, one of the highlights of my weekend, can't believe it was only 2 hours. Like, I could do that all weekend. So, we really challenged ourselves to say, well, if we're going to break off and do a separate event that's not CrimeCon, that's really focused on a single case for an entire weekend, how could we do that while maintaining our standards of what we want to do, which is always helping the family and always helping the police? We don't want to get in the way of anything. And it's tricky when you're talking about a real case, that there's often things that are not in the media or there's information that is not privy to us that if we just took on a case, God forbid, we ruin something. So sort of our two standards for going in for well, I guess let me back up and say what CrowdSolve is as a mission, which is taking attendees, all of us in a hotel for a weekend, working on a real life open cold case file with the police, with the family, and with the experts that we've brought to bear in various areas, and really seeing if by Sunday, we can make a real difference both in new thoughts, theories, ideas. We've got a budget as CrimeCon for testing. There's a lot of times small jurisdictions don't have the finances to do some of the testing that larger cities do. And so, it's not that we feel like we're going to come out on Sunday with the golden envelope of here's the killer, this isn't made for TV, but we do feel like our attendees are so passionate, so smart, so engaged. When we structure them and match them with the right people in each area, we really feel like we can breathe new life into something that's 10 or 12 years old.
And you mentioned the one in Seattle coming up, and you're covering the missing persons case of Nancy Boyer and the unsolved murder of Karen Bodine, which is the case featured in this episode of The Murder of My Family. How did you select these two cases?
Well, the first thing is the what I told you, the sort of standards we had were police involvement, so police working with us, providing our attendees, even under a confidentiality agreement, the full unredacted, uncensored case file on site, and then also the family not only being supportive but being there at the event. And so the first thing is I'll just give you a little bit behind the scenes, and I think most true crime fans probably have already guessed this. When you have a cold case that is a decade old, it's very difficult to find one where the police and the family get along. And it's generally speaking, it would be because the family over the course of 10 years feels that the police have let them down, right? They've, quote, botched the investigation, or they just stopped paying attention to it, or whatever. But it's hard to find a relationship that is still in good shape after 10 years. So it's hard, and we went through hundreds of calls and hundreds of cases really before we found the Nancy Moyer case, and really were excited by the reaction of Thurston County Sheriff's Department in Washington State and the Moyer family. Everyone was aligned on, it's time, this is solvable, we want justice, help us. So we signed on for that case, and a podcast, James Basinger, who runs Hide and Seek, had started following the story as well and digging in. We aligned with James, announced the event, brought James and the Moyer family and the lead detective to New Orleans for CrimeCon, did a session there to kind of give everyone a sneak peek. And then July 9th, this guy calls Thurston County 911 and confesses to the crime. And I had a very bad night that night, because the question is this real, right? Well, anytime you start getting a case back out into the media, which we were doing, leads to the question of, well, is this a crazy person who now wants to take responsibility for something he didn't really do, or is this real? And if it's real, amazing. That's the best case scenario. I'll change the event, no problem. Don't worry about me. But it left us at that point in a quandary. So we've added what you mentioned, the second case, Karen Bodine, because frankly, we don't know from today through October 17th what's going to happen. DNA tests come back and this guy did it. We're not going to do a full weekend of trying to solve a case that's solved. So we've added the second case, Karen Bodine, which met all the same criteria as the Nancy Moyer case: police involved, family involved, 12-year-old homicide, and a family and a community that deserves justice.
Well, that's what's great when you can help those families that have been looking for answers for so long.
It would be great if we could. They're already, when we told the Bodine family that we were going to accept their case, there was literal tears, and I think that it's a good first step for us, is to just have a family be so emotional that what they thought might have been a case forgotten by time is not going to be forgotten, and that they're going to have hundreds of people paying attention to this. They're going to have local media that we're going to bring in. They're going to have our media. That's the number one thing they could ask for, is just don't forget. Now if we could then make some progress and give the police some real sense of direction, and potentially some budget to do some real testing on some things and make real progress, that would be, of course, the best outcome of all.
Awesome. And tell us a little bit about what people that come to Seattle to the CrowdSolve can expect, and how they can get involved and help.
Yeah, so if you come to CrowdSolve, I think it's going to be one of the most rewarding experiences for a true crime fan of your life. I think that regardless of what happens, because the way we have it organized essentially is, you will first go through a series of 101 sessions with our experts, right? So depending on the case, in the Bodine case, we do have a body. She was strangled. So we're going to get into some of the experts involving, for example, strangulation, autopsy, crime scene reconstruction. There was some DNA that was found. Those issues relate to the Bodine case. On the Moyer case, which is really a missing persons case, although certainly Nancy's presumed dead, you don't have a body, so you've got a lot to do with victimology, criminology, the crime scene. There was no crime scene, but her apartment itself, the timeline of the day, witness statements, changing of witness statements over the years, these sorts of things. So the first thing that attendees will get is really a 101 into the main topics for each of these sort of, we call them breakout sessions, right? So regardless of the case, you're going to just get a 101 on, for example, ligature marks. Then the next thing that happens is you will get into a working group, and these working groups will sort of rotate through, where they will go into a room. They will have 10, 15, 20 pages of the case file that pertain to a certain area. Let's say that it's false confessions with this guy that called in. You'll get that piece of the case file. You'll have our false confession expert in the room. You'll go through it all, talk about that piece of the case file for an hour, move on to the next one, right? The next one could be, again, crime scene reconstruction. Our crime scene reconstructionist will be there. We'll talk about the tire tracks. We'll talk about the positioning of the body, the time of day, all these sorts of things. Digest that part of the case file, move on. So really, over the course of the weekend, you've gotten the education piece, then you've applied that to the case file, and then the last step is sort of all the working groups working with a facilitator to, what are the key questions that we have for the police and others? What are the key next steps and action items? Taking all of that and kind of bringing it together as the whole group gets back together with the police and the family, and sort of do a loose presentation of our findings, which will ultimately, as CrimeCon, will then write a kind of final report for Thurston County, and they'll take it from there. We're not vigilant. We're not going out and doing investigating ourselves. Our investigation happens within those walls. We hand things back, and then the police will take it from there. And there's a private Facebook group for attendees where they'll be kept up to date on progress of things, test results, all those sorts of things as they go back home and can follow along.
Well, that's pretty exciting to be part of that whole process of, hey, let's try and solve a crime here, and to be immersed in that. So it sounds like people going there will have a lot of fun. If anyone out there listening wants to be part of CrowdSolve in Seattle, where can they get more information?
Yeah, crimecon.com, and you can click on the events from there. You can also go to crimecon.com/CrowdSolve. That's the landing page. We have the Seattle event that we just talked about in October, and then we've also added a Chicago event in February. We don't have the case picked out for Chicago. We're working with PD right now. Bunch of great options, but again, like we talked about in Seattle, we've got some very strict criteria. So we will have an amazing case in Chicago. We don't have it up there yet, but you can also get a badge for the February event in Chicago now.
Wow. Well, hopefully you guys get some breaks in some of those cases you're doing, and bring some attention, some awareness on those cases. And I'm really hoping that you guys can help solve some of the cases. How cool would that be to be part of something where you actually present something that helps solve the case?
I think it would be great, and it would be great for true crime, and it would be great for, I think, the view of others on this community, that if we can harness the power and the passion of folks in the right way, I think we could really have something that law enforcement really across the country could tap and use and borrow from this structure to breathe some new life into stuff.
Absolutely. And I hope everyone out there listening goes out and checks out crimecon.com to learn more. And Kevin, it's always great to talk to you. I'm looking forward to seeing you in Orlando this coming May.
Absolutely, Mike. Appreciate your support as always.
Special thanks goes out to Debbie Buck at TrueCrimeDiva.com for writing and research assistance in this episode. Thanks also goes out to Sharon Bodine for joining me to discuss her daughter's case, and to Kevin and the entire CrimeCon team. If you'd like to help CrowdSolve Karen's case, be sure to check out crimecon.com. And of course, if you have any information about the murder of Karen Bodine, please contact the Olympia, Thurston County Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-TIPS. Thank you once again for joining me for this special bonus episode of The Murder of My Family. And I'll be back soon with another episode. And before you go, remember that every murder victim means something to somebody.